What have you been thinking about?
Well, I have to say there's been one thing on my mind, and that is what's happening in the financial system, because I opened up my phone last weekend to pay some bills because I pay everything online, and discovered that I could not get into my account unless I signed away all my rights and all of my um, privacy and everything. And the thing was just hit that little agree button, and I decided I wasn't going to do that. I ended up downloading the agreement called the Digital Services Agreement, all 125 pages of it, and started reading it. And holy cow, it is the New World Order right there. And I went to the bank the next day and closed my accounts, moved all my money. So that's been the big thing that's been on my mind for the whole week. I have to tag on to what Kingsley said as well. I was watching that whole Russell Brand thing, and I saw the list of people that have been targeted and accused of some sort of sexual misconduct. And so this brings me to the other thing that's been on my mind is, when are we going to grow up around the whole issue of sex and stop using it to pound on one another and to make one another bad? That just really bothers me. So it's unfortunate for Brand, but I think he is one of the people that, by being taken down, the naughty boys are revealing how they are, who they are, and they're just shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, Brand is a very interesting guy, very articulate, and he's really kind of fun to watch. And he pulls no punches, and so you can see why he'd be the target for all of this kind of stuff. I've had a couple of things. Number one, I got some report or announcement from somebody that said that they're going to do an exercise of the emergency broadcast system on the 4th of October or something like that, and that they're going to use it to send a signal through a 5G signal to activate the vaccine, or I don't know, but it's on at first blush you want to say, golly, I mean, what in the world is this? What's going on here, and is this even believable? But at the same time, then you've got guys like Cliff High and the remote viewers, Dick Allgaier, and others who are all saying that on their radar screens there is some really big event that's inbound in the next 3 or 4 months, or at the latest maybe within a year. But it is in Cliff High's kind of metrics, it's 13 times larger than in impact and significance than 9/11. And so it's like you're kind of working your way into the end of the game here, and everybody's just throwing everything against the wall they can to see what sticks. And so it's an interesting kind of problem to kind of think your way through what might be inbound that would be of that kind of significance. And that's part of what we're trying to do here at the Arlington Institute a little bit. So, well, thank you a lot for that. Richard Tyson says, hi, Kingsley talks about greater forces coming in. That's a bit vague to me. What are these greater forces anyway? Well, from where are they coming in, and what does coming in mean? So, Kingsley, there.
Well, when I thought back on that comment and where that came from, then I'm fairly sure that came from a comment I said last time about according to the wisdom traditions, the perennial wisdom streams, they've said that at these great epochal moments, these great transformations, that there's an energy that is made available. And therefore, in this context, it assumes it's an evolutionary energy that it made available for the new organs of capacity, the new organs in humanity, to actually grow into that energy. So it's like, it's an evolutionary process. So therefore, the organs of perception, the organs of capacity, the psychic development, the inner evolution of the human being is kind of, attracted to these new energies to develop. So it's like a catalyst. Now, that's according to these wisdom traditions. So it does sound vague because they never go into specifics. I don't know where it's coming from either. So if they talk about evolutionary energies, my understanding and perspective on that is that these are the grander cosmic energies that always come into planetary environments at certain times of the planetary growth. So when is it coming? I don't know, but I don't think it's overnight either. I think we're talking about evolutionary planetary time. So it's going to be coming in, but I think there's going to be a kind of a more sensitive people are going to be picking up this kind of finer resonance coming in. And going back to the first question, I think if we can detach from the lower, denser energies, then we'll be more kind of open and receptive to whatever finer evolutionary energies are coming in. So I think I think the whole planet is going to be bathed in a different type of vibrational frequency, which is evolutionary trigger. And some people can be receptive to it. How? Well, I don't have the answer. I don't think there's an ABC. I think the basic point is not to be drawn in or entangled into these lower vibrational energies of fear and worry about loss and all this, but actually to be receptive with joy and positivity and faith to move forward in advancement. So it's kind of vague, but evolutionary steps always are from the human perspective.
Yeah. Some sources have suggested that the waves of energy coming out of the center of the galaxy and so on would activate aspects of our DNA that have been dormant previously. And of course, everybody that studies this stuff suggests that most of the DNA, they don't know what most of the DNA does. They call it junk DNA. And the fact that it probably has some higher level kind of function and that it might be activated here seems to be a part of that whole equation as far as I'm concerned. So Deborah Aaron says she just became a premium member and so enjoyed the full membership options. Quartet was great and helps me think in expanded ways and focus on good and giving my energy positively. Well, take being aware of things. Thank you for those comments. Kate Jones says, again, some great comments. She really appreciates all of this and she wonders, can you offer any suggestions on the process of expanding joy? Joy is elusive. My sense is that joy is sustainable. Guess it depends on how you define joy, but Kingsley, what do you think?
Well, I think joy is not only sustainable, I think it's contagious. And I think anything which is on the frequency is contagious to other things on that frequency. So I think joy, in order to kind of be in joy or to find joy, is not something tangible. It's a state of being. So I would say put as much effort as possible into feeling that into whatever joy is, whatever makes you happy, whatever can bring some element of lightness, and lightness on frequency as well as being, because that's going to find like resonance. Like resonance will find you if you're there waiting for it to meet it halfway. So joy, meet it halfway and it will find you. And it's about also the smaller moments in life. Sometimes we get overwhelmed by the great things happening, and we do speak about great things on this program. So I think it's also important to take care of the smaller things that can give you a little lightness, and even a small thing like whatever small thing, petting my dog brings a smile to my face. So there's a lightness in small relations and interactions with the things of this world. And before we finish, I just want to say thank you to Mark for your comment about giving me the heads up on Jimmy Buffett.
Both of you have raised some very interesting points around this subject. And more recently, Kingsley, you talked about the fact that you know, the people have to be different. It has to, you cannot presume some dramatically different outcome that is generated by the principles and the values and the processes that we understand now. That are our problems are a product of who we are and how we're organized and what we do right now. And so if you're into a space in this mind experiment that we're talking about where there is no war, then you have to you assume that humans are not operating the same way that humans operate now. And in particular, there is, for instance, I would suggest that they would have a different history. They would have worked themselves through what have potentially, and with all indicators suggest, a very volatile period of time here in the next few years that have got great change. And in a sense, you'd kind of come out of that and say, I don't want to ever do that again. It's like those folks who came out of the Depression and said, no, we're not going to get ourselves into one of those again. And so there are things associated with the assumptions of the kind of memories that people carry with them. There are it is, as you have suggested, an issue of communications. And at one level, it's easy to kind of project and say, well, this has got to be a world where the internet works. Well, maybe it's more than the internet, like you say. Maybe it's people just understanding each other and having all of this interpersonal communication that is not tied to any of the technology that we understand right now. There are any number of things like that that could kind of set the stage for and obviate the kind of government, the ideas that we have now. Another thing, it seems to me, is that along the line of what I kind of alluded to, is that there need to be a new set of principles. It's almost as though, and I've been trying to collect some of them, you know, it's like the golden rule almost. My guess is that there's about a half a dozen, maybe 8 basic kind of concepts. I wrote one down this morning that says all ideas are good and are valuable, and you should never reject any idea just out of hand. And because I was reading a little about the history of science and how all the new ideas, when they emerge, suddenly get all dumped on and by all the people who have a vested interest in the old reality. And somehow there's a switch in this new space where people all realize that ideas are really the path to the future. And so, you know, they all don't work out. They're not all the same, but you don't just summarily get rid of. And you have to teach a whole generation of kids what these principles are. These principles that say something like you can do anything that you want to do as long as you don't hurt anybody else, which then calls into question, what do you mean by hurt anybody else? But you know, you get the idea about what I'm talking about here, is that it's about freedom. It's about saying if any decision, you know, which side of the decision generates more freedom for everyone involved. There are these new kind of notions and concepts that allow you to kind of intuitively understand the right way to. You don't need a regulation. You don't need a stop sign or you know, a stoplight to tell you whether it's time to go or not, because kind of like a traffic circle, you wait for the right time and you know what the underlying rules are and you operate accordingly. There is some deep redesign of who we are, who we think we are, sense of ourselves, and so on, that would allow and support a new world like this that didn't have any government. You would really have to. There would be a degree of trust that does not exist right now. It's a whole different kind of soup that you'd operate in. And there are places, I suppose, in the world right now, and localized places where you have certain communities and things where they've kind of put together some elements of this, and you can start to see a picture of it and a kind of a sense of it. But there is this multi-level dimensional kind of operating space that all contributes toward what I would suggest kind of freedom, and that as opposed to control, which is where government always operates, in the middle of control. So anyway, it just seemed and the value of it, Kingsley, is it seems to me is that if you have some kind of an idea what that thing at the end of the tunnel might look like, and it give you a sense of short-term or mid-term kind of decisions, or you've got some where this trends in that direction or in that direction, and you have some kind of a map, a sketchy map that you can operate off of. And so it's useful to try to build the futures or the scenarios or the ideas about how this all might work. So anyway, that's where I come out on this.
Well, to respond to that, John, Penny, do you want to go, or
Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, I mean, to respond to that in one way, I mean, as I mentioned, definitely the aspect for me is the human being. That's going to form all these structures, because governments are constructs that we put in place. So the human is the core element. Now, you mentioned this operating space, to use your terminology, about ideas and values and freedom, but we need commonality in understanding those terms of reference, because if we're speaking about freedom, we're talking about the human dignity and a lot more, similar values. You ask maybe an elite person from the cabal, what's freedom? They'll say depopulation, so I have less people around me, so we don't have the same terms of reference. So you see, the terms of reference is the software, but the hardware, the humans, is what interprets it. So values and all these notions of ethics and that, they're abstract until they're defined and put into practice by the human being. So I think that we really need to the roadmap, these ideas are useful, but everyone interprets them differently. But I think it is useful to say that the people of the future, and as you mentioned this, I think that's correct, will have to come through this transition, to have this life experience, because what we don't want is, Instagram influencers running government, because otherwise you just sit there like doing selfies. We need people who have come through this transition, so they are already kind of hardwired for a new cultural renewal coming into place. But the government is an external construct which is projected by the interpretation of reality of the human being. And so we need a changed human. Yeah.
Wow. And I have to add something to that. John, you said something that just really struck me. It was, ideas are the path to the future. That is so true. And if you don't have people that are fully developed, who haven't developed their consciousness, expanded it, really work through all of the transition pieces and ask themselves, what is government for? And what is that new world? What kind of world do we want to have? What does that look like? Then we're not going to get to that future for 1,000 years yet. So I think that is if ideas are the path to the future, where do we need to focus? It's really on human development and getting people out of the old box that they have been in for a while. A lot of people are starting to hop out of that box, kind of like the frogs out of the boiling water kind of thing, which I find very gratifying. And at the same time, the whole question of where are we now? Who are we now? What are we doing? How should we think about this? Nobody's answering those questions. Nobody's leading the space or holding the space for those questions to be answered. And we'll fall down if we don't come up with those kinds of leaders, if, people who can invite others in and say, what do you think? What are you seeing? I think personally that we have to decide, are we going to stay at a 3D level? Or are we going to move to 5 or 4, at least fourth dimensional level, which is a whole different kind of thinking. And it is based on a whole different kind of human who internalizes and perceives differently than most humans do today. I'm appalled sometimes at the reactions I get, and they're thinking they're perfectly normal, and I'm like, okay, I must be the abnormal one here. So that question, what kind of new world do we want, has to be right there as we go through this whole transition, or we're not, if we don't keep our eye on the ball, we're not going to get there.
Yeah, and I think we need to do exercises and go through discussions like this and so on, and start to build the possibilities, the options, the ideas, if you will, about how this new space would be populated and how it would operate, and how would it feel and how would it look like. There's to get away from the abstractness that Kingsley reasonably suggested, is that somehow you need to take some of these basic principles or objectives or values, if you will, and start to focus them or overlay them onto a mechanism, a way of operating, a new world. Somehow it needs to move from being this kind of conceptual space toward the engineering, production.
Okay, so if we take the government we have today and we say, okay, we're gonna have a new world and a new government, what I think we're gonna run into is people saying, well, who's gonna tell us what kind of
Yeah,
education?
I know.
Who's
Yeah, I
gonna
don't
do?
think you can do that. I don't think we can start from here. And that's why I was kind of suggesting it's
Right.
a mind experiment to just jump out into the future and start to say, what could this look like? Because then you could say, hey, that's kind of cool. And so then it becomes something that resides in the back of your mind as a possibility, where
Right.
before it wouldn't have been a possibility. You wouldn't have thought about it. And so now it sits there as an option, as a way to influence the things that happen between now and then.
Many generations do you think it will take? Yeah, any idea on that?
Oh, I have no, I don't have any idea. So, and the possibility is that it might be accelerated far faster than what we think, because we are locked into a system where the metabolism of the system is constrained by who we are and what our technology is and the other kind of stuff right now. And as Kingsley has suggested, I mean, in this kind of space, you might have telepathy all over out the gazoo, right? And so everything just goes really quickly and everybody just makes decisions all over. And so, I mean, it's a really different, the thing that's interesting about the little exercise is that you've got lots of different sources that all talk from their own perspective about the same idea of 1,000 years of peace. This is not some random biblical verse that is buried somewhere in Leviticus or something like that. This is an idea that is it's all over the place, and if in fact that has some purchase, if it's got some traction, then you say, wait a second. If you do really have something like that, if that's where we're going, then wait, that's a really different kind of place.
I
I'm
mean, the
just
core.
gonna bring Kingsley, let me say this because I want to
Sure.
something you said. That 1,000 years of peace, I think that has been misrepresented. I think it's 1,000 year, whatever, 1,000 years of a golden race of people. And that goes right back to what Kingsley said. What kind of people do we have? What are they doing? What are their skills? What's their perspective? So we'll maybe get the 1,000 years of peace by realizing it's really 1,000 years of development of a golden mindset that people step into. And maybe like the 100th monkey, all of a sudden
Yeah.
a whole bunch of people get it. Boom.
Right. And also I wanted to add on that is, well, we call it government. So what is government? Government is a way of managing, socially managing, cultural managing. So irrelevant of what type of human you are, you have these organization. It's a form of organization and it's a form of communication. And the core element has to be trust. Because you have to be able to trust those people you give your responsibility to for organizing this. And so at the moment, that's the one thing that's breaking down all over the world is people are taking their trust away from any government authority structures. And they realize that they're being conned. So that's, I think, is a sign that this model is done and over with. So whatever type of human we are, I mean, if we do have telepathy, we know we trust them because we can perceive them. But until we get to that stage, government is about collaborating with the people to represent them. And the only way that people, after breakdown and after uncertainty and after chaos, will outsource and give responsibility to people to do this and do this is trust. Just like I trust that my legs are going to walk when I get out of the bed in the morning. I trust my digestive system will take my food in, because we all play a part. And so I think we have to understand and work out how we're going to trust again.
Yeah, this is very important. Martin Armstrong, of course, in his computer propose and predict that in between 2025 and 2027, there's going to be a global civil war. And what the remote viewers say, and it's a common word that comes out among them as they look into this space, is that it pivots on betrayal. And that, in fact, that this upheaval, this reorganization is all based upon the notion that people have lost trust in the governments, and they feel that they've been screwed, and that we've trusted you and you've betrayed our trust. And so you're right. So then you say, having gone through that exercise and seen how the government has risen up and taken advantage of us, then buried in the back of your brain, or whoever you are going forward into this new world, is this notion that says somehow we've got to build into this thing a mechanism, and maybe it is based on telepathy, but some other mechanism that maintains that trust. If you've got 1,000 years of peace, you've got 1,000 years of trust. And what is it that has built that trustworthy that framework of trustworthiness, I guess, that everybody operates off of? That's what's kind of interesting to me.
I think that's freedom. It's freedom to see, freedom to speak, freedom to be honest and not be fooling yourself or
By
anybody
the
else.
people. Freedom by the people. Government originally was by the people for the people, but it hasn't been that for a long time. So we have to go back and give these structures from the people. People we trust will then go into these structures. So we have to feed these management organizational structures that we call government from the bottom up again. Whoever, I mean, we may see some great figures and leaders coming through this cultural renewal after this collapse, and we shall know them from their behaviors, not from their talk, from their behaviors. And maybe then people will put them and ask them to come into positions of power, and then a new power, a collaborative power, will then start to come up from the bottom up into these structures.
Very nice. Yeah, I would agree. Penny, any last word?
Yeah, I would just say that we would invite them into positions of leadership, not positions of power. I think power is going to be a dirty word for a while. And leadership is a nice interim thing. And that is something that the robes said, that many of the new leaders would be drawn from the spiritual field, and they would have a spirit of love and a spirit of adventure and a spirit of, we can do this, and people would like that. So
Yeah,
I think
thank
it'll
you.
work.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's fascinating because different people bring different things to the table. They have different experiences. They see the world in a different kind of way, and somehow in this trusting environment, there needs to be the avenue that allows the emergence of ideas and values those, those people who think in those kinds of terms, and the people who help make it happen, and all of the different kind of functional space roles that we all kind of play. And somehow as this trusting a space. So it's going to be really different, and it could be a great deal of fun. It's excuse me, I'm just thinking.
Panic interlude.
Maybe uh, maybe the Margaritaville is just the emergent kind of indicator of the possibilities that might exist downstream in those terms. But that's rather frivolous, I would say. All right, so let's decide what we all have to think about what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. After I remind all of our good viewers that this comes to you from the Arlington Institute, which is a little think tank that I put together 35 years ago, and we're now located in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, a little resort town in the Appalachian Mountains, just 100 miles from Washington and Baltimore. And there's all kinds of good stuff that we're doing, and you can find out about it at transitiontalks.org and arlingtoninstitute.org. And we hope that you'll come back and be with us again. So Kingsley, what 2 weeks from now, what's going to happen?
Oh, it's so hard to say because I mean, right now everything's happening all over the place. They're throwing everything around. It's. Have you noticed how a lot of politicians are making visits very quickly all over the place? And I think, Zelensky just spoke at the United Nations, so I think there's going to be some more political maneuverings going on so clearly, which has been going on for a while. And in the European front, we've had a lot of upsurge in the migrant situation, with a lot of arrivals coming and upsetting a lot of the locals and a lot of friction. So I think that in the European part is going to continue in the debate, but I think there's going to be some political shenanigans and going on and some new kind of arrangements. But these are all part of the jigsaw going around. So I can't just put my finger on one or two at the moment. It's like the water's boiling. That's what's happening at the moment.
It certainly is. Penny?
Yeah, I would, I've often said I've been watching that Ukraine thing like a hawk, not like I want war, but it means like really watching. And I think that we're now at the big turning point for that. I think people en masse are going to begin to see that that's the stuff that we've been told is not the least bit true, doesn't even begin to be true. So that's going to bring a change of attitude. The other thing that I see over the next couple of weeks is that there's this watching, I guess I'll call this intense watching, like people are now awake and they're saying, what the heck is going on here? I mean, we've been saying that for a long time, but the big population is now awake and they're watching intensely. And I think that that's going to result in some action. It's a eeny, meeny, miny, mo, where you want to put your action, because you could, just like Kingsley said, there's so much happening. Is it banking? Is it education? Is it what? So those are the main things. So
a lot of big possibilities, that's for sure.